The vast chamber of the Galactic Council darkened as the 100 representatives fell silent. High Counselor Tahoe rose from his seat, his tall, slender form casting a long shadow across the polished floor. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of grave importance among his kind. "The reports are troubling," Tahoe said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The species of Sol 3 has progressed too quickly. In merely 2 centuries, they have moved from primitive combustion to quantum manipulation." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Councillor Doyen, representative of the Oran sector, raised a scaled hand. "High Counselor, are these humans truly a threat? Many species advance quickly before reaching their natural plateau." Tahoe tapped a control on his podium. The central hologram flared to life, displaying a small blue planet. "This Earth has not shown signs of plateauing," he replied. "Their rate of advancement follows an exponential curve. Our predictions show they will achieve interstellar capabilities within 15 cycles. Once they do, they will discover our monitoring stations. They will know we have been watching." The hologram shifted to show images of human conflict, wars, weapons, destruction. "More concerning is their nature," Tahoe continued. "They are divided, competitive, and surprisingly resilient. Unlike most species we have encountered, they thrive on challenge rather than seeking equilibrium. This combination makes them uniquely dangerous." Councillor Yunji of the Central System stood. Her crystalline form caught the light as she moved. "The law of non-interference is clear," she said. "We cannot openly act against a pre-contact species. It would violate our oldest treaties." Tahoe's upper eyes narrowed, "Which is why I am not proposing open action. This requires subtlety. The humans must appear to destroy themselves through their own folly." The chamber darkened further as a new figure emerged from the shadows behind Tahoe. Even among the diverse beings of the Council, many felt a chill at the sight of Jimin. His form was deliberately plain, humanoid, of medium height, with no distinctive features except for his eyes. They were entirely black, revealing nothing. "I present Operative Jimin," Tahoe said, "the Council's most effective problem solver." Everyone knew what that meant. Jimin had eliminated 17 potential threats to galactic stability. Sometimes it was a dangerous technology. Sometimes an unstable government. Sometimes an entire species. His methods were never discussed openly, but the results were always the same. Problems disappeared without any connection to the Council. Jimin stepped forward, his movements fluid and precise. "I have reviewed the preliminary data on Earth," he said. His voice was soft, but carried to every corner of the chamber. "Their technological development is impressive but uneven. Their defenses are focused outward, designed to protect against each other rather than external threats. This creates numerous vulnerabilities." He gestured, and the hologram changed to display Earth's communication networks, power grids, and defense systems. "Their civilization depends on interconnected systems. Disruption at key points would trigger cascading failures. With proper calibration, these failures would appear to be the result of their own technological immaturity," Jimin explained. "No direct action against the population would be necessary. Their systems would simply fail." Councillor Mincio, representative of the oldest worlds, rose slowly. "We must be certain. Other options should be considered. Perhaps guidance rather than elimination." "We tried guidance with the Centauri," Tahoe interrupted. "They detected our probes and reversed the technology. The resulting war cost billions of lives. We cannot risk another such mistake." Mincio sank back, silent but clearly troubled. Tahoe looked around the chamber. "I call for a vote. The elimination of the human threat through covert means. Speak now if you oppose." Silence filled the chamber. Even those with reservations knew the statistics. Species that developed too quickly without proper guidance almost always became destabilizing forces. The risks were too great. "Then it is decided," Tahoe said. "Operative Jimin, you will depart immediately. You have full authorization to use whatever means necessary to ensure the humans do not become a threat to galactic stability. Jimin bowed slightly. I estimate completion within 2 standard cycles. No trace will lead back to the Council. As the assembly dispersed, Jimin remained in the chamber, reviewing the data package on Earth. The humans were primitive in many ways, but surprisingly advanced in others. Their quantum communication experiments were particularly noteworthy, almost as if they had stumbled upon principles that most species took millennia to discover. Still, they had no unified planetary defense, no detection systems beyond their atmosphere, and their leaders remained divided by arbitrary geographical boundaries. It would be among his simpler assignments. Jimin's ship was prepared within hours, a stealth vessel with technology centuries beyond anything humans could detect. His plan was methodical. First observation from orbit, then limited surface reconnaissance, followed by targeted system failures that would cascade globally. Earth's civilization would collapse without ever knowing what hit them. The journey to Sol would take 17 days at maximum speed. Jimin spent the time studying Earth's languages, cultures, and behavioral patterns. If direct infiltration became necessary, he would need to pass as human. His shape-shifting abilities were perfect for such tasks. What troubled him slightly was the human's unpredictability. Most species followed logical patterns even in crisis. Humans, however, often acted against their own self-interest or made intuitive leaps that defied explanation. This made them harder to model with complete accuracy. No matter. Unpredictability was interesting, but rarely changed the outcome. Jimin had never failed, and Earth would be no different. Meanwhile, 400 million kilometers from Earth, on a small monitoring station disguised as an asteroid in the orbit of Mars, something unexpected happened. The station's quantum detection array, designed to monitor Earth's early quantum communication experiments, picked up an unusual signal. It wasn't from Earth, but rather from the direction of the galactic core. The station's AI, programmed to filter and categorize all detections, initially flagged it as background noise. But subsequent analysis revealed patterns consistent with Council encryption protocols. The signal was faint, degraded by distance, but unmistakable. The AI followed its programming. It couldn't understand the content of the message. Council encryption was far beyond its capabilities, but it recognized the source signature. This triggered an alert protocol established years earlier by a forward-thinking human scientist who had theorized that quantum signals might be the first indication of alien intelligence. On Earth, in a heavily secured facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Major Hyunjin of Earth Defense Intelligence stared at the alert on her screen. For 7 years, she had monitored the Mars detection array, watching for exactly this type of signal. Most of her colleagues considered it a waste of resources, a scientific curiosity rather than a practical defense measure. But she had always believed otherwise. And now, the proof was flashing on her screen. "Get me Admiral Park," she said to her assistant. "Priority Alpha. Tell him the Silent Bell Protocol has been activated." What neither the Galactic Council nor Operative Jimin knew was that humanity had been preparing for first contact for decades. They had detected faint quantum echoes years earlier, not enough to prove alien existence, but enough to raise suspicions and initiate defensive protocols. And now, as Jimin's ship accelerated toward the Sol system, Earth was receiving its first confirmation that they were not alone, and that their first contact might not be friendly. The game had begun, but not quite as the Galactic Council had planned. The hunter was coming, but the prey was already alert. Admiral Minji stood in the command center of Earth Defense Headquarters, buried 2 kilometers beneath Mount Fuji. The room was silent except for the soft hum of quantum computers and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. On the main screen, lines of alien text scrolled alongside their translation, a message never meant for human eyes. "Play it again," she ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of what they had discovered. Major Hyunjin nodded and restarted the decoded transmission. The translation was still rough, but the meaning was clear. a death sentence for Earth, delivered in the sterile language of bureaucracy. Target: Sol 3. Species: human. Status: pre-contact, development anomaly. Threat assessment: high. Action: covert elimination via cascade failure. Operative: Jimin. Timeline: 2 standard cycles. Minji's hands tightened on the railing as she looked around at the 12 men and women who made up Earth's Joint Space Command. They represented every continent, the best minds humanity had to offer. None of them looked surprised, just grim. "So they're sending their best killer," she said. "Then we'll prepare our best welcome." General Chunot, head of tactical operations, leaned forward. "The quantum signature suggests their technology is at least 2 centuries ahead of ours. Conventional defense will be useless. But we have something they don't expect," said Dr. Suman, chief scientist of Project Prometheus. She was small and looked young for her 50 years, but her eyes held the intensity that had revolutionized Earth's understanding of quantum physics. "They think we're blind beyond our atmosphere. They don't know about the Mars array or the Kuiper belt sensors." Minji nodded. "How long do we have?" Major Hyunjin checked the tracking data. "Based on the quantum wake, their ship entered our solar system 6 hours ago. Current speed suggests arrival at Earth in approximately 5 days." "Too soon for a full planetary defense," General Chunot said. "But enough time for a targeted response," Minji replied. She pressed a button on the console. A 3-dimensional map of the solar system appeared, highlighting the projected path of the alien ship. "We don't need to defend everywhere. We just need to strike at the right moment." She turned to Commander Dahyun, head of the Ghost Fleet program. "Are the prototypes ready?" Dahyun had been silent until now. He was the youngest person in the room, elevated to command because of his brilliant work on stealth technology. 3 ships are fully operational. 2 more could be ready in 48 hours if we cut safety protocols. "Do it," Minji ordered. "We need every ship we can get." She turned back to the group. "I need to be clear about what we're facing. This Jimin has eliminated 17 potential threats, according to the transmission. The Galactic Council considers us a minor problem. They're confident. That's their weakness." Dr. Suman pulled up data on her tablet. "Our analysis of their quantum signatures shows they use a different approach to faster-than-light travel. Their method creates a detectable wake, something they obviously don't know or don't care about. This gives us a tracking advantage." "And their encryption?" asked General Chunot. "Complex but not unbreakable," Dr. Suman replied. "They use quantum entanglement similar to our own methods, but with patterns we hadn't considered. We've adapted our algorithms to decrypt about 60% of their standard communications." Minji nodded. "Good. Now let's talk about our response options." The next 4 hours were spent in intense planning. Project Prometheus had been preparing for first contact scenarios for decades, with thousands of simulations covering everything from peaceful exchange to full-scale invasion. But none had anticipated this specific threat: a single, highly skilled operative sent to trigger Earth's self-destruction. By midnight, they had a plan. It was risky, but as Minji reminded them, the alternative is extinction. At 200 hours, Minji left the command center to make a secure call to the United Earth Council, the 12 leaders who represented Earth's unified government. This would be her 3rd briefing since the alien transmission was detected, but the first since they had formulated a response plan. "Madam President," Minji began when the secure line connected. "The Joint Command has assessed the threat and developed a response strategy." President Juwoo's face was tense on the screen. At 72, she had led Earth through unification following the resource wars, but this was a different kind of crisis entirely. "Tell me we have options, Admiral." "We do," Minji replied, "but none without risk. The alien operative expects to find a primitive planet with no awareness of their presence. We can use that expectation against them." She outlined the plan: Rather than waiting for the assassin to reach Earth, they would deploy the Ghost Fleet to intercept and capture both ship and operative. The technology on that ship could advance Earth by decades, perhaps giving them the edge they would need for future encounters with the Galactic Council. And if capture fails? The President asked. Then we destroy the ship before it reaches Earth orbit, Minji said simply. We lose the technological advantage, but eliminate the immediate threat. President Ju was silent for a long moment. The risks of capture are higher. If we fail, we still have secondary defense options, Minji assured her. But success would give us access to technology we might otherwise spend centuries developing. Another long pause. You have authorization, Admiral, but I want hourly updates once the operation begins. Understood, Madam President. The call ended, and Minji returned to the command center. The room had transformed in her absence. New holographic displays showed the status of the Ghost Fleet. 3 ships barely larger than 20th century fighter jets, but containing Earth's most advanced technology. Status, she asked Commander Diane. Ghost 1, 2, and 3 are prepped and ready. Crews are boarding now. Ghosts 4 and 5 will be ready in 36 hours, ahead of schedule. Good work, Minji said. She addressed the room. We have authorization. Operation First Strike is a go. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. The Ghost Fleet launched from the lunar base, their revolutionary engines leaving no heat signature or conventional propulsion trail. They would position themselves along the predicted path of the alien ship, hidden behind the natural debris of the solar system. Meanwhile, Earth's defensive systems were being reconfigured. If the intercept failed, they would need every advantage they could get when the assassin reached Earth. On the morning of the 4th day, Minji stood in the command center, watching the main display as it tracked both the alien ship and the Ghost Fleet. The alien was following exactly the course they had predicted, a curved approach that would bring it to Earth's dark side, minimizing the chance of visual detection from the surface. Ghost 1 reports ready, announced the communications officer, in position near Mars' orbital path. Ghost 2 ready, position, asteroid belt edge. Ghost 3 ready, position, lunar shadow. Minji took a deep breath. Humanity had never faced a moment like this. Their first contact with an alien species would be an ambush against an assassin. Not the peaceful exchange that generations had hoped for, but a desperate fight for survival. Begin Operation First Strike, she ordered. Ghost 1, you have primary engagement. Ghosts 2 and 3 maintain positions for secondary intercept if needed. On her screen, she watched as Ghost 1 began its approach toward the alien vessel. The ship was piloted by Commander Ji-hoon, Earth's best pilot, and a quantum physics prodigy. If anyone could pull off this intercept, it was him. We're not waiting to be eliminated, Minji said quietly, almost to herself. Humanity strikes first. Around her, the command staff watched in tense silence as humanity's future hung in the balance. In the void of space, invisible to conventional detection, Earth's technology was about to clash with that of the Galactic Council for the first time. The hunt had begun, but the hunter had become the hunted. Jimin sat motionless in the command chair of his stealth vessel, his eyes closed in meditation. Around him, the ship operated in perfect silence, every system optimized for undetectable approach. The cabin was dimly lit with a soft blue glow that highlighted his sharp features. After 17 days of travel, he had entered the Sol system 8 hours ago. And so far, everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The ship's central display showed a real-time map of Earth's orbital space, a chaotic mess of satellites, space stations, and debris that circled the blue planet. Primitive technology by galactic standards, but surprisingly abundant. The humans had cluttered their orbital paths in a way that suggested poor planning and excessive competition. Jimin opened his eyes and studied the display. Computer, identify optimal approach vector to avoid all Earth observation capabilities. The ship's AI responded in a soft, neutral voice. Analysis complete. Recommended approach through Sector 7 Delta. Earth's satellite coverage contains a recurring blind spot due to orbital mechanics. Probability of detection, less than 0.002%. Jimin nodded with satisfaction. This would be a simple mission after all. The Council had been right to be concerned about human development, but wrong about the immediate threat level. Their detection systems were basic, focused primarily on tracking objects within their own atmosphere or immediate orbital paths. He adjusted his course to follow the recommended approach, then checked the mission timeline. 3 days until Earth arrival. Then a week of passive observation from orbit before beginning the systematic collapse of their infrastructure. He had done similar work on 4 previous planets. Earth would be the 5th. Computer, begin passive scan of Earth communications, he instructed. The cabin filled with a cacophony of human voices, music, and data streams as the ship intercepted thousands of unencrypted broadcasts. Jimin winced at the noise before the computer automatically sorted and categorized the signals, reducing them to a manageable stream of information. He listened to news broadcasts, sampled entertainment programs, and reviewed data transmissions. The humans were indeed chaotic, divided into nearly 200 political entities they called nations. They argued constantly about resources, boundaries, and ideologies. Yet they had also created art of surprising beauty and demonstrated occasional glimpses of remarkable cooperation. Pity, they would never have the chance to mature as a species. The Council's decision was final, and Jimin was merely its instrument. As he passed the orbit of Mars, Jimin noted the red planet's small moons and sparse artificial satellites, mostly simple observation platforms according to his scans. Nothing that could possibly detect his ship's advanced stealth technology. He allowed himself a small break from monitoring to prepare a meal. The ship synthesized food based on his homeworld's cuisine, a luxury he permitted himself during long missions. As he ate, he reviewed the dossier on human physiology again. If he needed to go to the surface, his molecular restructuring would allow him to pass as human without difficulty. 2.5 days from Earth, Jimin was completing his rest cycle when a soft alert chimed. He immediately came to full awareness, a skill developed over centuries of missions. "Report," he commanded. Anomalous energy signature detected at bearing 045 by 072, distance approximately 300,000 kilometers. The computer responded. Jimin frowned. Source: unknown. Signature does not match any cataloged natural or artificial phenomena in Council records. That was unusual. The Council's databases were comprehensive, including detailed information on nearly every spacefaring civilization and most pre-contact species. "Display visual," he ordered. The screen showed empty space, just the distant stars and blackness between them. "Enhance and apply full spectrum analysis." The computer complied, but the result remained the same. Nothing visible, yet the energy signature persisted. "Track the anomaly," Jimin ordered, his instincts now fully alert. In 17 star systems, he had never encountered something the ship couldn't identify. For the next hour, he monitored the strange energy reading as it appeared to drift relative to his position. The signature would fade occasionally, then reappear slightly closer. Its movement patterns seemed deliberate rather than random. "Computer, analyze pattern for possible intelligence." Analysis suggests non-random movement, 87% probability of directed action. Jimin felt the first stirring of concern. Could Earth have detection technology not reported in Council records? Impossible. The Council's monitoring stations had been in place for centuries. Adjust course by 20 degrees. Let's see if it follows. The ship silently changed direction. Within minutes, the anomalous reading adjusted its position as well. Now Jimin was genuinely troubled. Something was tracking him. Something that shouldn't exist according to all Council intelligence. Full defensive scan of local space, all frequencies and dimensions. The ship complied, extending its sensors to maximum range and sensitivity. For several minutes it processed the data. 3 artificial objects detected using advanced stealth technology, designating Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Alpha is the source of the energy signature we have been tracking. Beta and Gamma are in holding positions at coordinates 127 by 318 and 215 by 092 respectively. The screen displayed their positions relative to his ship. They had formed a loose triangle around him. This was impossible. Earth shouldn't have this level of technology for at least 2 centuries. And their stealth capabilities, while primitive compared to his ship, were far beyond what the Council reports indicated. Time to intercept by Alpha at current speed. 17 minutes if both vessels maintain course. Jimin made a quick decision. Activate primary drive. Let's leave them behind. The ship's engines surged with power as it accelerated to speeds that should make pursuit impossible. The stars blurred slightly on the view screen. Status of unknown vessels. Alpha has matched our acceleration. Beta and Gamma have adjusted course to maintain containment formation. Now Jimin felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Genuine surprise. The human ships shouldn't be capable of matching his speed. Something was very wrong with the Council's intelligence. Prepare defensive countermeasures. Arm energy weapons. Countermeasures ready. Weapons armed. Jimin considered his options. His mission was covert elimination, not open conflict. Engaging with these ships would violate Council protocols. But being captured would be worse. Perhaps a warning shot would be sufficient. Target Alpha with minimal energy pulse. Fire when ready. The ship hummed as it charged its weapons. A moment later, a barely visible pulse of energy shot toward the pursuing vessel. What happened next occurred so quickly that even Jimin's enhanced reflexes couldn't respond. The energy pulse seemed to hit nothing, passing through empty space. But then a ship suddenly appeared where nothing had been visible before, its stealth field disrupted by the energy impact. It was small, sleek, and clearly built for speed rather than power. More alarmingly, in the instant of its appearance, it fired something toward Jimin's vessel. Not an energy weapon, but a physical projectile that moved with impossible speed. Incoming projectile. Unknown type. Impact in 3 seconds. Jimin's hands flew across the controls, activating the ship's strongest shields. Evasive maneuvers. Too late. The projectile struck the ship and immediately exploded into a cloud of microscopic particles that enveloped the entire vessel. The ship's external sensors went dark. Then internal systems began failing in cascade. Warning. Unknown technology detected. Shields compromised. System failures on all decks. Jimin tried to activate the emergency protocols, but the control panel no longer responded to his touch. The lights flickered and died, leaving only emergency illumination. Emergency power to life support and engines, he commanded. No response. The ship was dead in space. Through the viewports, Jimin saw the 3 human vessels now fully visible and approaching. Their design was like nothing he had seen in Council records. Angular, with strange protrusions that seemed to bend light around them. As his ship drifted powerless, he felt something he hadn't experienced in his long career. Fear. Not for himself, but for what this meant. The humans weren't just developing quickly. They had somehow leaped centuries ahead in specific technologies. The Council had severely underestimated them. The cabin temperature began to drop as life support failed. Jimin reached for his personal emergency device, a last resort that would place him in stasis while transmitting a distress signal to the Council. Before he could activate it, a strange field of energy passed through the ship. It had no color, no texture, but Jimin felt it as it moved through his body. His muscles stopped responding. His consciousness began to fade. His last coherent thought before the stasis field took complete effect was simple but profound. This should be impossible. He was wrong. Jimin regained consciousness slowly, which itself was unusual. His species could typically snap from sleep to full alertness in an instant. This gradual return to awareness suggested something was interfering with his natural abilities. He kept his eyes closed, using his other senses to assess his situation. The air smelled clean but artificial, with faint traces of unfamiliar chemicals. The surface beneath him was firm but not uncomfortable. The ambient temperature was slightly cooler than his preference. Most concerning was the strange tingling sensation throughout his body, a clear indication that his molecular manipulation abilities were being suppressed. This should have been impossible. No species in Council records had technology that could affect his unique biology. He finally opened his eyes, revealing a white room with smooth walls. He was lying on a simple platform that served as both bed and examination table. No visible doors or windows broke the seamless walls, though he detected subtle airflow from hidden vents. The lighting came from the entire ceiling, creating no shadows. Jimin sat up slowly, noting that while his movement wasn't restricted by physical restraints, his body felt heavy, sluggish. He was still wearing his mission suit, though all his equipment and weapons were gone. A seam appeared in one wall, widening into a doorway. Two humans entered. They looked just as he expected from the Council records: bipedal, limited physical capabilities, no natural defenses, but their eyes held intelligence that contradicted the Council's dismissive assessment of their species. The first human was female, wearing the uniform with insignia indicating high rank. She stood straight, her posture suggesting military training. The second was male, shorter, wearing a white covering over his clothes, a scientist. Jimin guessed. "I am Admiral Minji of Earth Defense Command," the female said in perfect galactic standard, which should have been impossible. "This is Dr. Sunwoo, our lead xenobiologist." Jimin kept his face expressionless, but his mind raced. The humans shouldn't know galactic standard. They shouldn't have been able to detect his ship. They shouldn't have technology to neutralize his abilities. The Council's intelligence was catastrophically wrong. "You've been unconscious for 17 hours, Admiral Minji continued. "Your ship has been secured and is being studied. You are in a containment facility 2 kilometers beneath Earth's surface." Jimin spoke for the first time, testing whether his vocal abilities were also affected. "How did you detect my ship?" His voice sounded normal, though speaking felt strangely exhausting. Admiral Minji smiled slightly. "That's an interesting first question. Not why am I alive, or what do you want, but straight to the technical details." She stepped closer. "We've been watching the Council for years, Jimin. Did you really think we wouldn't develop quantum listening technology?" The casual use of his name and the mention of the Council sent another shock through Jimin. The human should have no knowledge of either. "Impossible," he said. "Your technological development hasn't reached that level. The Council's monitoring stations would have detected it." Dr. Sunwoo spoke for the first time. "Your Council has been monitoring our public technology, what we allow to be seen. Our defensive development has been compartmentalized." Jimin studied the scientist, noting his calm demeanor. "You're claiming your species has maintained a secret technological track, undetected by the most sophisticated monitoring systems in the galaxy. For what purpose?" "Survival," Admiral Minji said simply. 73 years ago, one of our research vessels recovered a damaged probe in the outer solar system. It wasn't of human origin." Dr. Sunwoo continued the explanation. "The probe contained data fragments that, once decoded, revealed the existence of galactic civilizations. Not complete information, but enough to know we weren't alone, and that we were being watched." Admiral Minji began walking slowly around the room. "Instead of announcing this discovery, our leaders made a critical decision. We would continue our normal, visible development while creating a separate, hidden program to leap ahead in specific defensive technologies. Project Prometheus," Jimin said, remembering a term from the intercepted communications. "Yes," Minji nodded. "Named after a figure from human mythology who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. We've been selectively accelerating our development in quantum communication, stealth technology, and xenobiology for decades. Dr. Sunwoo stepped forward. What the Council doesn't understand is that humanity doesn't want conflict. We've studied the fragments of your databases recovered from the probe, and later from covert intercepts. Your civilization is stagnating, trapped in rigid hierarchies and fixed patterns. We want to revitalize it, not destroy it. Jimin felt a strange sensation he couldn't immediately identify. After a moment, he recognized it as confusion, an emotion he hadn't experienced in centuries. Everything he thought he knew about this mission was wrong. "Why capture me instead of destroying my ship?" he asked. "You must know my purpose here." "We intercepted the Council's order for Earth's covert elimination," Admiral Minji confirmed. "But killing you would solve nothing. The Council would simply send someone else, perhaps with a larger force." Instead, Dr. Sunwoo added, "We want to offer an alternative. A new relationship between humanity and the Galactic Council." Jimin studied them both. His training included detecting deception across dozens of species, and he detected none in these humans. Either they were being truthful, or they had evolved beyond the biological markers of deception that affected all known sentient species. "The containment field," he said, changing the subject. "How does it work? It shouldn't be possible to neutralize my molecular abilities." Dr. Sunwoo smiled slightly. "We discovered that quantum resonance at specific frequencies can temporarily disrupt the neural pathways that control voluntary molecular manipulation. It doesn't harm you, but it prevents you from changing your form or structure." Jimin couldn't hide his surprise. "You developed this specifically for my species. How could you possibly know?" "We didn't," Sunwoo interrupted. "We developed it to contain a microorganism discovered in Earth's deep ocean that exhibited similar properties. The application to your biology was a fortunate coincidence." Admiral Minji returned to stand directly in front of Jimin. "We want to show you something." She touched a panel on the wall, and a portion of it became transparent, revealing another room. In it stood a large holographic display showing thousands of stars, a map of the local galactic sector. "These red markers show Council worlds," Minji explained. Hundreds of stars glowed red on the map. "The blue markers show Earth colonies and outposts." Jimin stared in disbelief as 27 stars turned blue, scattered throughout the sector, some dangerously close to Council worlds. "This is a deception," he said flatly. "You have no off-world colonies." "Not colonies with human populations," Dr. Sunwoo clarified. "Automated research stations, stealth observation platforms, quantum relay networks. We've been building them for decades, using unmanned ships with minimal energy signatures." "Impossible," Jimin repeated, but with less conviction. Admiral Minji's expression hardened slightly. "You keep using that word. Yet here you are, in our custody, your ship disabled by technology that shouldn't exist." Jimin fell silent, processing this information. The implications were staggering. If the humans had established this level of presence without detection, the Council's security was fundamentally compromised. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. "Your help," Dr. Sunwoo replied simply. "You know the Council better than anyone we could possibly reach. You understand their weaknesses, their fears, their decision processes. You want me to betray the Council," Jimin stated, "to help you infiltrate and subvert their authority." Admiral Minji shook her head. "No, we want you to help us prevent a war. The Council fears what they don't understand. We want to be understood, not feared." For the first time in his long career, Jimin felt something unfamiliar stirring within him. Respect. These humans had outmaneuvered the Council, captured him, the most feared operative in 17 systems, and yet they spoke not of revenge or dominance, but of understanding. "You could have killed me," he observed. "It would have been simpler." "Simpler, yes," Dr. Sunwoo acknowledged. "But we believe in finding better solutions than elimination. Unlike the Council, apparently." The implied criticism stung more than Jimin expected. Throughout his centuries of service, He had never questioned the Council's decisions. Their wisdom was absolute, their perspective spanning millennia. Yet they had been catastrophically wrong about Earth. What else might they be wrong about? "I need time to consider," Jimin said finally. Admiral Minji nodded. "You'll have it. But not too much. The Council will expect reports from you soon. When they don't arrive, they'll send others." As the humans turned to leave, Jimin spoke again. "The technology you used to disable my ship, it wasn't in any Council database." Dr. Sunwoo paused at the doorway. "Quantum-entangled nanodisruptors. They attach to external systems and propagate through internal networks, temporarily disabling technology without destroying it. We developed it 5 years ago." "For what purpose?" Jimin asked. "For exactly this situation," Admiral Minji answered. "To defend without destroying. To give us options beyond annihilation." As the door sealed behind them, Jimin remained seated, his mind working through the implications of everything he had learned. The Council had sent him to eliminate a primitive, dangerous species. Instead, he had found something unexpected. A young civilization that had developed in secret, not to conquer, but to survive and connect. For the first time in centuries, Jimin found himself questioning his mission. And for the first time ever, he considered the possibility that the Galactic Council might not be the unassailable authority he had always believed. High Counselor Teo was midway through his address on agricultural trade regulations between the Orion and Centauri sectors when the chamber's lights dimmed unexpectedly. The 100 representatives of the Galactic Council looked around in confusion. In the 5,000 years of the Council's existence, no session had ever been interrupted. "Security breach in communication systems," announced the automated chamber VI. "Unknown signal override." The massive central hologram, which had been displaying crop yield projections, flickered and dissolved. In its place appeared the image of a human female in a dark uniform with silver insignia. Beside her stood several other humans in similar attire. And most shocking of all, at her side stood Jimin, the Council's most feared operative, looking calm and unrestrained. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members rose from their seats, shouting questions and demands. Some called for immediate military response. Others simply stared in disbelief. Silence. Taiho's amplified voice cut through the uproar. The chamber quieted, though the tension remained palpable. He turned to face the hologram. "Identify yourself and explain this intrusion." The human female nodded slightly. "I am Admiral Minji of Earth Defense Command. Your assassin delivered your message to us. We're returning him with one of our own." Counselor Doyun stepped forward, his scaled face flushed with anger. "This is impossible. How did primitives from Sol 3 breach our security? Where is the rest of Operative Jimin's team? How did you capture him?" Admiral Minji smiled slightly. "There was no team. Just one assassin, sent to trigger our self-destruction without leaving evidence. A cowardly approach from what claims to be a civilized council of worlds." Taho's upper eyes narrowed. "You know nothing of our motives or methods. Your species has been deemed a potential threat to galactic stability. The Council has existed for millennia to preserve peace." "Peace through subjugation is not peace at all," Minji replied. "But we didn't contact you to debate philosophy." She nodded to someone off-screen. "We want to show you something." The hologram shifted, showing a star map of Council space. One by one, red dots began to appear throughout the map. Dozens, then hundreds of them, scattered across every sector of Council territory. "What is this?" demanded Counselor Yunji, her crystalline form vibrating with tension. "These are Earth observation posts," Minji explained. "Automated stations we've deployed throughout your space over the past 50 years. Some are as close as 10 kilometers to your primary worlds." Taho stepped back, visibly shaken. "Impossible. Our detection grids would have." "Your detection technology is impressive but predictable," interrupted a human male who stepped into view. He wore a white covering over his clothes that marked him as a scientist. I am Dr. Sunwoo, Earth's lead xenobiologist. Your systems are designed to detect specific energy signatures and propulsion methods. We simply developed alternatives. The chamber was utterly silent now. The implications were staggering. If humans had been able to place hundreds of observation posts throughout Council space undetected, what else might they have deployed? This is an act of war, Tahoe finally said, his voice low and dangerous. You reveal your hostile intentions by this very display. Admiral Minji shook her head. If our intentions were hostile, this conversation would be very different. We've had the capability to strike at the Council for years. We chose not to. Jimin spoke for the first time, his familiar voice causing another ripple of shock through the chamber. Counselors, I was sent to eliminate Earth because you feared what you didn't understand. What I discovered was a species that has surpassed your expectations, and in many ways, your capabilities, yet seeks connection rather than dominance. Counselor Mincio, the eldest member, leaned forward. You appear unrestrained. Operative Jimin. Are you a prisoner or a traitor? Neither, Jimin replied calmly. I am a messenger. The humans could have killed me or kept me captive. Instead, they offered understanding and requested the same in return. Tahoe's patience had clearly reached its limit. Enough of this posturing. Humans of Earth, state your demands or face the full military response of the Council. As if in answer to his threat, the hologram changed again. This time it showed images from across Council space. Dozens of locations where previously invisible ships suddenly appeared, their stealth fields deactivated to allow visual confirmation of their presence. They hung silent and dark above Council worlds, near space stations, alongside defense platforms. Earth's fleet had decloaked throughout Council space, not attacking, merely revealing their presence. These vessels have been in position for weeks, Admiral Minji explained as the hologram returned to her face. Each carries enough firepower to neutralize planetary defense systems. They could have attacked at any time. They didn't. Jimin stepped forward again. The Council has misunderstood human nature. You saw their competitive drive and assumed it would lead to aggression. You fail to see that the same trait drives them to find better solutions, not just easier ones. The Council chamber remained silent, the representatives struggling to process this fundamental shift in their understanding of galactic power. Admiral Minji continued, we propose a new protocol in our relationship, one based on cooperation rather than subjugation. Earth wishes to join the galactic community, not as a subject species, but as a full partner. And if we refuse? Tahoe asked, though his tone had lost much of its authority. Then we continue as we have been, Minji replied simply, watching, learning, and preparing. But know this, Earth will never accept elimination or subjugation. The choice between peace and conflict is yours, but the days when you could simply remove us from the equation are over. Dr. Sunwoo added, our research indicates the Council has grown stagnant. The same qualities you feared in us, adaptability, innovation, resilience, are exactly what the galactic community needs. We offer these not as weapons, but as gifts. Counselor Mincio, who had remained thoughtful throughout the exchange, finally spoke. If what you claim is true, if you had the power to strike but chose restraint, then perhaps we have indeed misjudged your species. He turned to the other Council members. We should consider their proposal. Tahoe bristled. We cannot reward this behavior. They have violated Council space, threatened our worlds. After you sent an assassin to destroy their civilization, Jimin interrupted. The humans responded to your aggression with a show of strength followed by an offer of peace, which approach seems more worthy of a civilized species. The chamber filled with murmurs as Council members began to divide on the issue. Some aligned with Tahoe's hardline stance, others with Mincio's more measured approach. Sensing the division, Admiral Minji delivered her final message. The Council sought to eliminate a perceived threat. Instead, you awakened the sleeping giant, one whose first instinct wasn't destruction, but transformation. We will give you 30 Earth days to consider our proposal for a new relationship. Our ships will remain in position, but will take no hostile action unless provoked." She looked directly at Tahoe. "You tried to decide Earth's fate in secrecy. We bring our response into the light. Which approach better serves the principles the Council claims to uphold?" Before Tahoe could respond, the hologram faded. The chamber erupted once more into urgent discussion. The Council that had stood unchallenged for 5 millennia now faced a crisis unlike any in its history. Outside the chamber, Councillor Mincio pulled Tahoe aside. "We must convene an emergency session. The humans have changed everything." Tahoe's multiple eyes blinked in rapid sequence, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "They threaten us, and you suggest we reward them with membership." "I suggest we recognize reality," Mincio replied. "They could have attacked at any time. They chose diplomacy instead." The elder counselor looked toward the stars visible through the chamber's vast windows. "Perhaps what we feared most about the humans, their unpredictability, is exactly what makes them valuable." As debates raged through the council chamber, Earth's ships remained in position, silent sentinels representing a young species that had accomplished the impossible, forcing the mighty Galactic Council to reconsider its most fundamental assumptions. The humans had struck first, not with weapons, but with the most powerful force in the universe, an idea. An idea that cooperation might prove stronger than domination, that diversity might fuel progress rather than threaten stability. The Council had sought to eliminate a threat. Instead, they had discovered a potential partner, one that might help lead galactic civilization into a new era.